Happy full moon. I always feel like I have to post for any astrology event, and I didn't have a post for today. So I wanted to say hello. Hello to you in Peru. Oh my gosh, I want to go there. Hey y'all. Hi. How's everybody doing? Happy full moon. This is such a powerful full moon as an astrology symbol. And I did a subscriber meetup today for the people that are part of my extended subscription. And it's such a sweet community space. And a lot of people were going through a lot. I know I've been going through a lot. I'm wondering how folks are doing. Hello in Australia. I want to go there too. Hello in California. I also want to go there. Y'all are in places where there's sun. Where I am, it is still cold and still rainy. So, I just wanted to say hello and kind of just offer a little bit about this full moon. I've been thinking about it all day. I was just recording a special podcast. Hello in Vancouver. You're in the rain too, probably. I was just recording a special podcast as a fundraiser for my friend Minerva. I tried to do a Instagram live with her the other day, and our connection didn't really work. So I'm making a special podcast episode with her and talking a little bit about Venus cycles. And this full moon has a lot of significance with Venus because the sun is conjunct to Venus today. But then I got bored with editing and got lonely in my house and thought maybe I would just get here in the virtual living room and see if you guys wanted to hang out for a second. Hi. Anyway, today's full moon, I want to actually show you this chart for a second. So you can see it right there. That's the full moon chart. If you see this shape here that looks like a kite, this is a really powerful astrological pattern or chart pattern. And so what you're seeing in these 3 points are all planets and air signs. So here's today's moon in Libra. Here's Mars and the transiting North Node in Gemini. And then here's Saturn and there's Jupiter in Aquarius. And all of this stuff here, that's all Aries. So here's the sun. And then the sun is forming a triple conjunction today with Chiron and with Venus. And over the course of Aries season, both the sun and Venus will move on to form conjunctions with Ceres and Eris, which are pretty powerful symbols. But if you just look at this kite configuration for a second, it's a super powerful and really dynamic configuration because a grand trine, which is when you have placements in all 3 signs of the same element, so in this case, the air element, a grand trine is just energy flowing, right? Elementally, air flows into air, flows into air. So we've got a lot of air energy. And in elemental theory or astrological Western astrology theory, air relates to information and thought and communication. So a lot of people are experiencing information overload right now. There's a lot of stuff going on. But then this kite takes all of that energy and kind of pushes it into the head of the kite, into the direction that it's flying in. So that's Aries. This is cardinal fire. And this, with Aries, we really have a symbol for the self and for the self-identity. And particularly with the triple conjunction of Sun, Chiron, Venus, such a powerful symbol for self-reflection and self-awareness, which, I don't know, you guys probably know is my whole jam. It's how I think about astrology mostly. I find it the most useful that way. But it's also really interesting to think about it kind of out in the world. And especially this week, coming off news of 2 major shootings and kind of like a worldwide, like a global terrorism, right? White supremacist, capitalist terrorism that is killing our planet, killing people. Yeah, there's a lot of paralysis. And one thing that we were talking about earlier in the meetup today was how the amount of information, the access that we have to information now is different than it ever has been. To be able to just connect with you guys here, with a push of a button, and to be able to share information in this venue, this is new. Like, this hasn't happened before. People can get a lot of news, and we can receive, we can access like firsthand information through videos, through firsthand accounts. And so the dissemination of information happens a lot more rapidly, and it happens, and it's more widespread. And so I think that, part of the overwhelm, at least that I'm personally experiencing right now, has to do with so many thoughts in my head and so much information that's coming in. And particularly this year in 2021, where the hallmark aspect of the year is Saturn square to Uranus. This is going to happen 3 times. And as a symbol, this speaks to a kind of major collapse and necessary restructuring. And this is happening on all levels: political, global, economic, environmental, and certainly relationally and personally, as we're all part of this, collective experience that we're going through with the pandemic, with environmental crises, and in the face of what's being revealed, and as a lineage of white supremacist terrorism. I think a lot of folks are starting to see how things have been built in a way that we've never seen them before. I speak for myself. I'm starting to see, even though I've known for a long time, I've known for a long time that a colonial history is a violent history, but seeing the way that things are breaking down with the pandemic, in terms of structural inequality and what's arising, in the last week in the U.S., with Georgia, the Republican governors passing these laws for just outright blatant voter suppression. Seeing that all happen, that's new for me. Right? I think it's new for all of us that we see these videos, we get the headlines, we get so much news that maybe we didn't have access to in the same way before. And the structural collapse, the institutional collapse that's happening around us is something that we can participate with to some extent, even if it's just paying attention. And I know that this is definitely new for me in my lifespan in terms of what kinds of information I have access to fairly easily. And I know that not everybody is paying attention to the news, and there's so much news that's happening, we can't pay attention to all of it. And so whatever is coming in to your consciousness right now is somehow feeding and influencing your personal experience and your relational experience. And I've talked about this before. I think I talk about it a lot with astrology, that our personal experiences aren't separate from what's happening in the collective, even when they don't seem to be tied in at all. And I thought I'd share a little bit about what I've been thinking about with Aries, and especially with the triple conjunction of the Sun, Chiron, and Venus in Aries. And see if you guys could relate to this at all. So we've started Aries season. We're a week into Aries season. That's where the sun is right now in the lens of tropical astrology. This is a season that begins with the equinox. So spring has sprung here in the Northern Hemisphere. We're at equal days and equal nights. Tropical astrology is a language that's based on seasonal light, and it uses the tropics of Cancer and Capricorn, or the Earth's yearly rotation around the sun, to divide time. Just as a side note, that's different than sidereal astrology, which is constellation-based. They both work. All systems of astrology work. Just want to put that out there, but they're different systems. So in the tropical system right now, we're in Aries season. And from our point of view here on Earth, on the 25th, just a couple of days ago, Venus formed the superior conjunction with the sun. And that means that Venus is on the opposite side of the sun from us. And that superior it's not like a judgment or qualification, but that's what it means, is Venus is far away from us, as opposed to the inferior, the interior conjunction, when Venus is closer to the earth and coming into alignment with the sun from our point of view. So Venus's conjunctions with the sun are traditionally a really important theme in astrology, and many schools of astrology or systems of astrology have watched Venus and Venus's cycles. I'm not at all literate in Mayan astrology. I really don't know very much about it, but I do know that the Mayan calendar and Mayan astrology worked a lot with Venus cycles. So that's an example of different methods, different schools of thought thinking about Venus. Within tropical astrology, which is what I've been trained in, the Venus cycles often refer to phases of purification and refinement in regards to our values and our relationship to our own bodies and our desires and pleasures, and also in relationship to others. Venus is a planetary ruler of both Taurus and Libra in tropical astrology. And in its relationship to Taurus, Venus is representative of bodily and sensory pleasure. So both Taurus and then Venus in its Taurian manifestation love pleasure and sensuality, and the ability to come into our senses and our sensory pleasure is a birthright. We deserve to enjoy our bodies to whatever extent we can, because life is also full of suffering, and we'll all experience injury and illness and harm and death and disagreement and discomfort. And so when we can find spaces for pleasure, joyful connection with one another, feeling the sun on our skin, eating a beautiful meal, curling up in some soft sheets, these are things that Taurus and Venus love. They love being able to be satiated in the body. And so with Venus's cycles, we might be called into reflection in relationship to sensory pleasure. And I think that I'm really inspired right now by people like Adrienne Marie Brown, who talk about pleasure activism, and if you haven't seen that book, definitely check it out. There's so much consciousness that can get built through pleasure, but it requires an unpacking of a capitalist approach to pleasure, or a consumptive approach to pleasure, because pleasure has been commodified. And the way that a lot of us have learned to understand pleasure is as consumption. And within a capitalist framework, then consumption also means exploitation, or it means extraction, or it means getting something that someone else doesn't have, or something like that. A lot of us have been kind of taught to think about pleasure in that way, whether it's through movies or media, or what we learned in school, or kind of just a general societal push to, get money so that you can have stuff. And when you have stuff, then you're going to be happy. And so a lot of people, I'll definitely put myself in this category. I'm a Taurus moon. Hello. It's if I just get that thing, or if I just have that sensory comfort or that bodily comfort, then things will be okay. And we can spend a lot of our time and energy pursuing material satisfaction, material pleasure. And those pursuits can also lead us to suffering. Pleasure Activism is a book by Adrienne Marie Brown, or she edited it and put it together. So it's a compilation of many different writers. And she's great to follow on Instagram. If you just follow Adrienne Marie Brown, she's always posting the gold. Her middle name is, with 2 E's, Marie, Maree. So anyway, with a Venus cycle, we might be called into reflection around how we've been in relationship to materialism. We might have an understanding about something that we need or something that we don't need. So not to knock, material satisfaction. I think it's like completely worthwhile to pursue it, but to have a critical framework that we can understand what we're attracted to and what we're trying to get, and understand like where some of these desires might be rooted, and also where material, like the pursuit of material satisfaction or desire might actually be covering up a deeper wound pattern or a deeper need. I've personally experienced, and I've worked with a lot of people who have dealt with eating disorders. And so this is like maybe one example, of a way that we might be in relationship to a material substance, to food, right? Which is a necessary substance. We all need food. But especially for those of us socialized as female, our relationships to food can be really complicated and messy, and we can internalize a lot of misogyny and self-criticism. And so we might come into relationship with food as a kind of compensation for like a deeper wound or a deeper insecurity or self-hatred or something like that. And I've experienced this, and man, I've like worked with so many clients, who have this really like rigid idea about what they're going to eat or what they're going to, it's like, well, this is what I need and that is what I need and this is what I need. But underneath all of that is anxiety. It's a deep fear and a feeling of wrongness and a feeling of being out of place in their body and not lovable and not beautiful. And so a Venus cycle might call us into relationship with food, for example, as a source of material pleasure, satiation, or consumption. And it might ask us to go deeper, like what's underneath this relationship or this fixation or this fear or something like that. So one way to think about a Venus cycle is in relationship to pleasure and objectified pleasure, and the material pleasure or the sensory pleasure. Venus is also the planetary ruler of Libra, and Libra is an air sign. All of the air signs are conceptual, so this is a kind of like thought-based space. Libra is a sign that represents the need for relationship and the need for balanced, harmonious relationship. Libra is not, I want to be clear, like the emotive quality of relationship. We find that in the water signs in Cancer, Scorpio, and Pisces. That's where we get bonded and we have feelings for other people. Libra is the like, maybe enjoyment of relationship or the necessity of relationship. And it speaks a lot to the contracts of relationship. Like, I'm going to do this for you and you're going to do this for me. And if we're thinking about Venus as a symbol for value, we have values, right, in relationships, and we also each carry value into our relationships. And whether or not it's something that we're conscious of, when we come into relationship, we're probably thinking about value, like what is this person going to bring into my life? Like, why do I want to be around them, or what am I trying to get? And also, what do I have of value? If I really like a person, like, are they going to see value in me? And so we're thinking about personal value when we come into relationship. And then we might also be thinking about other kinds of values that we bring into relationship. Of course, Libra is a symbol of marriage. Like, we need to unpack that a little bit and look at marriage as, a kind of placeholder within patriarchy and misogyny, heterocapitalism that, puts a monetary value on a woman's body, or a dowry price or something like that. But it's also real, like people get into relationships because of what they're going to get from somebody else. I've known people that marry for money, not for love, right? So that's there. We want to acknowledge that like there are values in our relationships, and I might really value a person that has X, Y, and Z experience or this kind of perspective or that, access to something, or who's a good dancer, right? Or who has like great record collection or things like that. So when you think about values in relationship, we want to think about that. But then we also want to think about this level of like personal value and how we're valuing one another. And Libra again, as a conceptual space, it requires us to get deeper than the superficial. And so if we think about Libra as, a lot of times you'll read about Libra as superficial, as a sign that is like representative of the aesthetic or the beauty of something or the surface presentation of something. And that's certainly one aspect of Libra, and that would be maybe like more of an unevolved aspect where we might be really attracted to certain people or certain situations, or we might try and make ourselves attractive by focusing on the surface. And it's like, oh, what am I going to wear? You know, or like, who's that person friends with, or what are my parents going to think about them, or something like that. Like, these are pretty surface level values. And we can spend a lot of time, we can spend our whole lives in surface level values of relationships, and we can never get deeper than that. That's definitely possible. But when we get deeper, then we get into other kinds of values, you know, like, does this person listen to me? You know, do I like their energy? Do they show up? You know, like if I'm going through a hard time, or we might get into our deeper values. And so then a Venus process might take us into a refinement of values. So I might think that I have a certain set of values, but then I may be challenged in my relationship, and I may realize that I'm not actually aligned with the values that I consciously think that I have or that I want to have. Or I might recognize that I've been holding certain values that maybe are no longer accurate for me or appropriate for where I want to be going in my life. So right now we're in this really powerful moment of the Sun and Venus forming their superior conjunction. And symbolically, this is a time when Venus is rising. It's in an ascending cycle, which is a little bit counterintuitive because it's also when Venus makes its transition to become an evening star. But in terms of how the Venus cycle relates to kind of some of the mythic roots of astrology in the Sumerian or Mesopotamian myths of Inanna and Ishtar, two goddesses that are different but also kind of became the same in some myths. And you know how these deities go, like they swim between different time periods and names and stuff like that. So within this goddess myth, this is the queen of heaven, and her sister is the queen of the underworld, and she goes into the underworld to visit her sister, but she's judged as she goes through, as she passes through these 7 gates, and she's judged as having hubris, which is arrogance, right? Like ego, uncalled for. And at every gate, she loses some of her possessions. Like she loses her crown, she loses her necklace, they're taken from her. And then at the end, she loses her life. Her body is hung up and she's killed. But she's a goddess, you know, don't worry, she'll come back. But in this part of Venus's cycle, so the descending Venus cycle, the symbolism here is that we're taken into an internal journey, and we have to reckon with certain kinds of ego attachments. We may need to renounce or give away or let go or somehow transform attachments that are false, right? Like they're attachments to pride, they're attachments to ego. So this cycle started back in June of last year. And if you rewind your brain clock and you remember June of 2020, just consider, what were you thinking about then in relationship to your values, to your pleasure, to your desires, to your relationships? How were you coming into relationship? What were you thinking about? What were you trying to embody? What were you moving after? What were you trying to attract? In the last 9 months, what's your journey been like? If we're going to think about this astrological symbolism, then in the last 9 months, have you been taken into an underworld journey of some kind? That's a question for you. I certainly have. Like when I think about last June, and particularly when I think about some values that I had going into last June about my relationships, and over the last 9 months, how I've been tested on those values, and now how things are starting to clarify for me, and where I'm recognizing that, in some places I'm not aligned at all with the values that I thought I had. And other places I'm super aligned, but I need to clear through some personal shit in order to actually embody them. And then in other places, my values are evolving and they're maturing. I'm seeing you guys are agreeing with this. Okay. Yes. So now, think to current time. On the 25th, Venus formed its superior conjunction with the sun. So this is the midway point in the Venus cycle. And now for the next 9 months, we move into the ascending cycle of Venus. So this is when Venus or the goddess, right, gets to reclaim her life. And she gets to take her crown back. She gets to move back into her body and her terrestrial form. But she's changed. Because no one goes for a journey to the underworld and loses all their shit and then gets hung on a meat hook to die and doesn't come back changed, right? So whatever you've been through in these last 9 months, have you had to give things up? Have you felt like something has died? Have you gone through some kind of intense transformation? You're not going to be the same on the other side. And what will be different? Have you ever gone, in your life through a period of death and transformation? I have, of course, we all have to some extent. So if you think about periods of time when you've really had to confront loss in a major way, and you've really had to look at your ego and let things go and contend with, your shadow side and your hubris or your pride or your arrogance or things like that, and after you've moved through that period of time, things change. They get clarified. They get simplified in a certain way. So that's where we are right now. We're at a moment of things changing. And as we move now into the next 9 months, we have a chance to embody our values in different ways and to try and put into practice some of the lessons that we've been learning over the last 9 months. So I'm just reading your comments, and it looks like a lot of people have been through a lot, which is not surprising at all, given what's happening in our world right now. And again, astrology is a language that is really helpful for us to think about what's happening in our world. I don't know if it's causal or not. Sometimes I think that there's a total causal effect between the planets and their relationships and us, and sometimes I don't. So I don't know, maybe I'll find out when I die, but so in December of this year, of 2021, Venus will station retrograde in the kind of middle of December, December 19th, I think. Venus stations retrograde, and Venus will be conjunct to Pluto when it stations retrograde. And over the course of the next couple of weeks, Venus is moving into square aspect with Pluto. That's a talk for another time. Pluto and Capricorn. To summarize it really quickly, Pluto is a really slow moving planet. It takes 200 something, 60 something years to move around the sun. It spends 14 to 20 years in a sign. It's been in Capricorn since 2008. This is a symbol, I think, of the putrefaction and decay process of structures, and particularly long-standing structures of power and dominant power, which is one of the things that Capricorn represents, are structures built by dominant power slowly and over time. And you can think of that in terms of gravity, like a mountain range is something that's built by a dominant power slowly and over time. You can think about that in terms of your bones, which is Capricorn's medical astrology rulership. and your bones are built slowly over time through gravity, through pressure. But of course, we can also think of that in a societal context or relational and human context. And then we can think about institutional powers and what has been built slowly and over time by dominant global powers. And of course, in this period of time, we're seeing the putrefaction, the decay, the crumbling, the death, dying process. And these are symbols of Pluto, death, dying, and transformation. Someone said narcissism, and Pluto is definitely representative of the shadow. And so the kind of like suppressed or subconscious or unconscious influences that we don't want to look at in ourselves, right? Like where we're power hungry assholes, it's like everybody has that potential in themselves. Plenty of people can deal with it, can be accountable to that potential in themselves. They don't need to act on it. But plenty of people don't think that that's what they are. They refuse to see that that's what they are. And then that's really what they are, and it's like that Ursula Le Guin quote, which I really love, that I have it on my computer, that people who deny the existence of dragons are often eaten by dragons from within. It's like this, I think that this is really good, as a Pluto symbol, that through our ontogenetic and phylogenetic memory, like we all carry all of the memories of human evolution. We carry our memories of personal evolution, our biographies, we carry our ancestral memories, and locked up in all those memories are tons of memories of survival. Right. And like, in order to survive, and we all got here because people survived somehow. And in order to survive, people have to do a lot. And especially within in a world that's like been shaped by colonial violence, to such an extent that it has, all of us carry such deep wound patterns and shadow patterns. And many of us carry the memories of perpetuating violence somewhere in ourselves, in our ancestral memory. And so to be able to somehow bring that into consciousness is an evolutionary skill. And by consciousness, I don't mean enactment, like I don't mean embodiment or belief that that's who you are, but to be able to look inside yourself and go like, wow, I'm capable of like narcissistic destruction, or I'm capable of flying into a jealous rage. Like that's in me. That gives you some kind of possibility that you won't do that. Like if you see your own capacity for that, at least you can work with it. If you don't see it, then you're going to embody it, and project it on others and make it into their fault. And that's a true narcissist. So with Pluto, we have a symbol of a kind of like toxicity, which is also potential for power, because when we recognize where there are unresolved influences or where there's deep pain in our soma or in our kind of like cellular memory, when we recognize that, then we can do the work of transformation. And if, when we do that work of transformation, it also means that we're not going to be held hostage by those influences. So, for example, and I've talked about this before, I was raised by a narcissist and a person that is a borderline personality, and experienced a lot of psychological abuse growing up with him. I have all of those influences in me, and in certain ways, they've held me hostage a lot in my relationships because I'm so scared to be like that. And I can feel, like as a young child, and I think anybody who's like had early influences in their lives that have been violent, as a young child, I did what I had to survive, like to make my own space. And so part of what that was internalizing his anger and internalizing his psychological distress. And as I came into my adulthood and started trying to navigate relationships, these parts of me would come out that were totally dysfunctional and fucked up and messy and harmful. And the more that I can look at those potentials, those seeds within myself, the less likely I am to act on them unconsciously. And it's super uncomfortable. It's horrible to like look at those parts of myself. I really don't enjoy doing it, but it makes everything in my life better when I do. All of my relationships, my relationship with myself, my relationship with my body, the feeling that I can like enjoy my life at all. It all revolves around doing that detoxification work. So societally right now, we're in a period when toxicity is here on the surface. I mean, we can see it. It's so blatant. It's in our faces all the time. It's quite disturbing and infuriating, but it's also an opportunity. It's also an opportunity to transform. So thinking about some of these Aries influences, right? We're in Aries season right now. Chiron is in Aries. Chiron is another kind of long-term transit. And Chiron entered Aries a couple of years ago, 2017, 2018. Chiron has a 50-year orbit around the sun. And one of its main themes is ancestral or intergenerational wound patterns and the healing of them. And Aries as a symbol is commonly associated with masculinity. I want to be clear that I'm not only talking about people with penises, but that masculinity in terms of the societal construction of masculinity. The hero, the machismo, the bravado, the warrior, the guy, like this kind of energy. And certainly right now, one thing that's very blatant, that's very obvious is like violence of masculinity. And also the violence of any kind of supremacy, white supremacy, Christian supremacy, class supremacy. And we can think about Aries in these contexts, or dominance. Yeah, that's another word that someone just offered. So we can think about Aries in these contexts because Aries refers to the ego and the sense of self. And the ego and the sense of self try to, it's a protective mechanism. And whenever there's power, power tries to protect itself, right? Unless it's a very evolved power, and then it can evolve and change. I don't know. But this is something else for a different time. But so with Aries, if we're thinking about Chiron's placement here, one thing that I've been thinking about is these kind of intergenerational and ancestral wound patterns that come through dominance, supremacy, and particularly that come through the embodiments of masculinity. Yes, I'll post this later. I keep trying to get my auto captions to work and they keep not. So I'll post this and then I'll post a version with subtitles later because I have to run it through another program. So in the last couple of weeks, as we've moved into Aries season, as the sun has come into conjunction with Chiron, there have been a couple of like major examples that I've been noticing, right, that feel like masculine toxicity. So 2 major shootings, so tragic, so traumatizing, and unfortunately, like not a rare occurrence these days. And if we look back at all these shootings, right, in the United States over the last however many years it's been now, since whenever the first one was, I don't know. It's like, it's all men. Mostly it's white men. Mostly it's white men who are trying to hold on to dominance and supremacy and superiority, and who are fucking terrified that maybe they're not going to be top of the stack anymore. And mostly it's, it's guys that like they don't have any worldview that could allow them to conceive of the potential that if other people that weren't white men, that weren't straight white men, if other people were happy and healthy in the world, that their lives would be better. Like they can't let that into their brains. Their minds can only get wrapped around supremacy. I need to be on top. I need to have control. I need to have the money. I need to have the power. I need to make the decisions. And if I don't have all of that, then I'm going to die. I mean, it's that kind of thought process, right? Like nothing else is going to lead a person to go on a mass shooting spree. It's like whatever animal instinct is coming up there is completely unreasonable If other people have, if that group of people have as much power as I have, then I won't be relevant anymore. It is psychotic. It's absolutely psychotic. Then there's the headline of the governor in Georgia, right? You guys saw that picture. This group of white men sitting underneath a painting of a plantation, signing legislation that totally restricts Black, brown votes from people who live in poorer communities. These are the people who have turned Georgia blue. And this group of white guys is going to try and block it. They're terrified, right? They're moving from some hubris, some base level ego, trying to hold on to what they think is theirs, which was never theirs, was always stolen. They're fucking terrified. So this kind of Aries influence to me speaks of Chiron and Aries, this like wound pattern of white male supremacy, hetero, straight, Christian supremacy. Do I personally identify with those archetypal embodiments? No, I don't. But if I meditate with it, and if I feel into myself, if I feel into my queer, femme, whatever I think about myself, progressive, astrologer self, I can still find the part of me that grasps for control when I feel like it's going to get taken away from me. I can still find a part of me that is terrified of not being relevant or not being somehow the best in whatever it is that I'm thinking about, like the instincts that can come up in me that feel like animal instincts that want to defend and protect what I think is mine are so deep, they're so twisted inside me and my psyche, and they're there. And the thing is right now they're up for me. And I don't know about you guys, but I've really been noticing them in myself as we've come into this full moon. And it doesn't feel like a terrifying moment for me. Like I don't feel overrun by my like subconscious monsters, but I do feel really, really aware of them. I feel really aware of the ways that I grasp for power in myself, and particularly in certain relationships. And when I think back to June of last year, and I think about the refinement process that I've been in terms of my relationships, these themes have been key themes for me. So I know that now I'm going into the next 9-month cycle of Venus, right? And Venus is starting this portion of its cycle from a conjunction with the Sun and Chiron. It's moving into a square with Pluto. So I'm being asked to go and to continue to go through this transformative journey where I have to dig into my insides. I have to go deep into my own unconscious. I have to see those dragons, right? I have to believe that they're there. I have to get to know their names. I have to see how they function. And I have to do my best to work with those instincts skillfully. And I think that this is where the energy of Libra comes in. I want to give a nod to Blair Bogan. You can follow them at Sister Bride. Blair's an awesome astrologer. And I've been in an art class with Blair, at art and astrology class. And I watched the recording of the last class last night. And Blair was talking about Libra and balance, and how balance is not a fixed point. And I thought this was such an important point to think about with Libra. That if you've ever taken a walk, or stood still, or if you've ever watched a plant grow or a tree grow or something like that, you know that balance is a negotiation. It's a shifting, it's a spiraling, and it's a constant oscillation. And any attempt at balance is always going to require an awareness of imbalance. And so with Libra, with tonight's full moon in Libra, I wanted to think about that and kind of call up this archetypal imagery of the subconscious and, our deeper monsters, and kind of like this Aries toxin or toxicity that we might want to look at, because we have to come into balance with ourselves, right? And one way that I've been thinking about this is that acknowledgement and naming is such a helpful tool when we're trying to balance, and especially if we're working with really deep patterns, and when we're working with our own judgment towards those patterns. Just being able to name them for what they are and then acknowledge them to ourselves can really help us find balance. So if I, for myself, can go like, wow, I'm experiencing a lot of insecurity, and it's okay. Like, it makes sense that I would be experiencing that. That immediately helps me not feel so insecure. Immediately, just to acknowledge for myself that I'm feeling a certain way and that it's okay that I'm feeling that. And, you know, it's not to say, oh, go out and act on it, but it's okay that I'm having that feeling. Like, oh, it would be normal, you know, given the context that you might be experiencing insecurity. That's fine. That to me helps me balance, because if I'm in a place of denial and going like, oh, no, like I would never act like that, you know, like, oh, no, like I feel totally secure, everything's fine, then what I'm doing is I'm pulling myself even further out of balance. I'm denying the place that I am. I'm reaching for something that I'm not. And this puts me into the low vibration Libra, right? Like the appearances space, where I'm existing somewhere in my shell, somewhere on the outside. And then I can't be in balance internally, which means that I can't actually be in a relationship because there's not honesty there. Yeah. So that's what I've been thinking about. When I was recording your horoscopes, like your month ahead Aries season horoscopes, I was looking at this full moon and looking at the new moon coming up in 2 weeks, and these aspects with Chiron and Pluto, and just going like, holy wow, like, I wonder what's happening for people right now, because I feel like we're all going through a kind of vortex or something. And everybody I talk to is like, yeah, me too. You know, it's just like so many layers that we're trying to work through in our own self-awareness that, you know, we can't separate them from what's happening in the collective, what's happening in the political, what's happening in the relational. They're all nested with each other. So someone asked, who's Blair? You should follow Blair at sister.bride. Blair is an astrologer who teaches a banging art class called Spacecraft, where they blend astrology and art prompts. And it's actually like been the thing that's been making me the most happy in these last couple of weeks. I've been having a really hard couple of weeks and going through a lot with Aries season, with Pisces season, and being in that art class is like giving me a reason to go on that, and you all doing this with you all. Yeah, so I don't know what's going on for you guys. Like, how are you feeling? I've been watching your comments and it seems like people can relate. I'm not alone. Tell me I'm not alone in this excavation of the shadow, in my encounters with the dragons. Are you guys feeling that too? Yeah, I'll add her name. Not alone at all. Oh my gosh, yes, Leo rising really needs a support group. Any other Leo risings out there, just DM me. We can support each other. Okay, so Venus is at the midpoint of its cycle. And I mean, planets have circular orbits, so its cycle is like a human construction, right? So it's a way that we're going to tell a story. So one way to tell the story of Venus's cycle is having it begin with the inferior conjunction, or the interior conjunction, depending on what word you want to use, which starts when Venus is retrograde. And that began in June of 2020. Venus is at the midpoint of its cycle now, and it will finish this current cycle in December of this year. I am a Leo sun and a Leo rising, for those of you that are curious. I'm also Taurus moon. I'm like all fixed in my major 3. which I'm grateful for sometimes and like not really stoked on at other times. Pisces people need a group as well. I like your guys' comments. God, I've been feeling so lonely lately. Have you guys been feeling lonely? This pandemic is really getting old. Hopefully we can hang out again soon. Anxious, not social. All right. Well, y'all, I'm going to finish editing this little podcast segment and I'm going to try and publish it later tonight. And I hope you check it out. And I'm going to offer a little bit more about Venus. I'm going to talk more about Venus in that podcast. And I'm also going to include an excerpt of a conversation I had with my friend Minerva the other day. And I'm going to just keep trying to promote her project, Roots Healing, which you all should check out. You should follow Minerva at Roots Healing. Minerva is a magical person who is a priestess and a healer and an Ayurvedic guide, and she's doing a doctorate in death, dying, and grief work. She's such an incredible person. Half of her family is from the Dominican Republic, and she is living there now and trying to start a retreat center there. And the retreat center is going to, I think, be a really special place that, is equitable and rooted in environmental justice and restorative justice. And Minerva is a queer woman of color, and a lot of her offerings are for queer and trans folks and folks of color. And she's going to have a retreat center that, caters to BIPOC and queer folks and is financially accessible. And I don't know about you all, but I spent 15 years teaching yoga. I've been out for a while now. And being in that world and like being around yoga studios and retreat centers was really disheartening a lot of the time. And there are plenty of folks out there who are doing such an amazing job and really like holding space with such integrity. But the corporate model for like retreat centers is bullshit. Especially these places that have like wellness and mindfulness retreats or yoga retreats, and you go there and it's a whole bunch of white ladies in really expensive, stretchy clothes and a whole bunch of brown people serving them. And those white ladies are sitting around like trying to find their higher selves or some shit like that. Like, it's weird. It's weird. And I'm sorry to anyone here who's like connected with that or attached to that, but I think it's really weird. And yeah. So Minerva's going to start something that is not that, okay? It's not that at all. And we definitely need more spaces like she's going to start. So I'm going to do a fundraiser for her, and I'm selling all of my April and May client sessions. 100% will go to her. So if you've been wanting a session with me, I'm going to put out an email for that probably later tonight. And I'd love to work with you. And for those of you that missed the beginning, I'll post this video. And for someone who wanted me to talk about dreams, I want to let you know that I'm not the person to talk to about dreams. I have very poor dream recall, but Blanca Villalobos is your person. And you can find Blanca also on Instagram. They were here earlier. I don't know if they're still here. If they are, maybe they can add a comment and put their name in the chat. But you can also find them at blanca.villalobos, Villalobos. And Blanca is a dream conduit, and she offers pretty regular workshops to help people listen to their dreams and attune with their dreams and interpret their dreams. And I've taken a number of them, and working with Blanca has actually helped me be in better relationship with my dreams, have a little bit more dream recall and connection with them. But I spend a lot of time in the archetypal realm with astrology, and I think I live in a dream a lot of the time. And so I've been kind of wondering if like I don't remember my dreams so much at night because I'm with them so much during the day. I've talked with some other people who work with astrology a lot and have had similar experiences. So yeah, someone just added oblanca.s.villalobos. Yeah, check Blanca out for dreams. Okay, everybody. I wish you a beautiful full moon. Tomorrow, Mercury and Neptune will be conjunct, and the sun is conjunct to Chiron. And if you're feeling woozy and out of sorts, just blame it on astrology. And if you are feeling woozy and out of sorts, I want to say it's a good day for meditation and dreaming. And like going within. And the next couple days are like that. So the influences of the full moon and then tomorrow's conjunction are pretty, like they're kind of like a portal, like a little bit of an energy portal. And then as we get into April, on April 3rd, Mercury enters Aries. And by that point, I hope, because I'm kind of in a funny place these days with Mercury and Pisces. I think as we get into April, maybe it's going to feel like a little clearer. For me, at least. I'm a fire sign person. I really don't have a lot of water in my chart. This Mercury and Pisces got me like, what? I just want to sleep. All right, babes. Love you. And yeah, catch you on the flip side in a digital instant, wherever that is, time and space. Bye for now.